And we are clear, and we are now going into, hello everybody on YouTube, and welcome to the show with Mr. Jeremiah Owyang. I'm letting everybody in. I'm hitting the record button. By the way, it seems like I'm in the bush, actually. My Airstream is, I'm on Safari. Well, hello, everybody. Oh, everybody's off camera. Why are you so...
I'm not, I'm cooking.
I feel, Tom, that everything comes back to philosophy. I was really glad, actually, that you were on yesterday's show. I know you weren't in the after show, but I thought there was philosophy just comes into everything, just like you probably feel marketing comes into everything.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, they're inescapable issues, right? Because philosophy just comes out of, again, love of wisdom, philosophia. Wisdom is just about, how to live well. And so everything is going to relate in some way or another. Like today's show was just full of all kinds of ethical implications and implications about well-being and happiness and maximized living and so forth and so on. So yeah, as I was doing my burpees, as I was doing my squats, everything, I really enjoyed the show today.
Yeah, I mean, it was, what I loved about it in particular is that, I get to find out something more about, Jeremiah and learn about him and some of, motivations. And I found it to be very inspirational to understand his thought process and his journey, but also tying it all together because, the whole wearables and wellness space is not new. But what is new is, there's so many aspects to it now, like space, the space aspect of wellness, for example. That was one. And then the other one, of course, is, as you say, there's a data, there's a privacy, there's an ethical aspect. And then the final, there's a, the distribution, wealth distribution, or the haves and the have-nots. And then, of course, during this day and age and this time of COVID, which is, so Jeremiah, why are you hiding from us? I see you off mic and off camera. Let me just make sure that you are able to, you can unmute yourself. That might mean that he's doing his burpees quickly.
You got to get him in.
But as soon as he comes off, he can add to it as well. But yeah, I found it really, really interesting. And I love the idea of calm tech. You must have loved that too, Jan, if I know you.
Yeah, I did. And the question I have is, at some point, if you use calm tech, do you realize you should untech yourself completely?
The deep philosophical question, right?
It's like you said, Joseph, you're driving, so stop. So at some point, and I love the fact that tech can help you, but at some point, I wonder if it's, bold enough to say, 2 weeks, don't talk to us. Go be with nature.
Well, I tell you, I mean, this may be a little bit of a kind of a non sequitur, but it's somewhat connected. There is, I think it's Discovery. They're an insurance company in South Africa, and they have connected their premiums. This is health insurance and other forms of insurance They've connected that to your gym membership and to the number of steps that you take every day. And you get, there is incentives, discounts, prizes associated with fitness. In fact, when I was in South Africa, every Saturday morning, there is a 5K fun run. And at the end of that fun run, it's sponsored by that company, you get a chip that you can, with a code, and by keying in that unique code, you're indicating that you actually went on the fun run. And by completing a certain number of them, there are incentives. And I think that's also, I mean, I think the real question is, will companies if given the choice of taking the high road and the low road, will they in fact take the high road?
Yeah. I use an app called Waking Up by Sam Harris, and in one of his interviews, it was debated whether one of the aspects of his own app was healthy or not. And he was candid enough to acknowledge that it might not be, and he removed it from his app. And the thing that was on his app that was being debated was something called current streak, that told you how many times in a row you meditated. And in him being open to what's what's mentally healthy or not, he decided to take that off. It was too much pressure, and it was giving somebody incentive in the wrong direction. And so now there's no current streak. And at first he said people were pretty pissed off at him. And I felt a little bit like, shit, that's how I work out, streaks. But he was right. Taking it away was very healthy for me.
Interesting.
But Jeremiah, I was going to say, Jeremiah is here
Hey.
now. So
Great comments, Jan.
Hey, Jeremiah.
Hi.
just letting
and
you know.
Sure, that's definitely like so the streaks is like telling you, you need to stay engaged. So the tech industry, they borrowed many of the techniques from Las Vegas addiction, and they actually sent a team over to analyze how it worked, and they hired people from the Vegas slot machine industry. And there's a famous class at Stanford, which is near Facebook, obviously, called the I can't remember what it's called, but it's around addiction. Bob, nice Airstream. And the
out of respect,
it's great. I love it. And it's around making addictive products. And the professor is BJ Fogg. So if you look up his name, you can figure it out. And there was a number of students that wrote books, and they were heavily criticized. But essentially, the dopamine hits that Facebook gives you from alerts, all of that stuff is part of that. And the lab is called the Stanford Persuasive Technology Lab, AKA addiction. How to make tech products addictive and how to make you come back for that streak. You missed that streak and that's pulling you. And all of those things are used in an unhealthy way. And so the reason that, I'm glad that Sam did that and pulled that off. That's not a great behavior.
They've had that. That's a known here in the Silicon Valley. I live in San Francisco.
Hey.
I also have a buddy who heads up big initiatives for gaming companies.
Same.
And they adopted all of those practices.
Absolutely.
So it's one of those things where even when the like buttons on your Facebook changed, so that if everyone got it at the same time and you opened up your app and they all fluttered like balloons, that was a new adoption that actually released more dopamine in your brain. And then the counter piece of that is that most of my buddies in high level positions at Facebook, Google, any of the aforementioned companies that we've talked about today, all have their kids in schools without screens.
Yes, I'm aware.
And so they've actually done the opposite with their own children. And part of what I tell my little boys all the time is they get very limited screen time, even during COVID, because it rots your brain. It rots your brain. It rots your brain. And they get that. And so they understand that. But it's the funny part about that, not haha, but everyone here in the Valley knows how powerfully toxic screens are and how addictive all these behaviors are. And it's just right out in the open. It's not something that people even defend.
Even right now, like when in a group chat, can trigger oxytocin as we are connected to each other like a pack. And we're missing that in our lives right now because we're not around our tribe. And so this is why Zoom in a way has taken off. This is a very casual conversation. And this is why social network adoption is continuing to grow. So dopamine, oxytocin are definitely being used to trigger these addictions.
Yeah.
Joey, going on the line of your thinking with kids not having access to screens, it kind of reminds me of the hypocrisy of the fossil fuel industry, if you don't mind me saying, raising the levels of their drilling rigs in the Gulf of Mexico and around the world to accommodate the rising seas and rising oceans from the effects of climate change that they were causing. It's just ironic that, you know, here you have executives who are creating all these devices and pieces of software and apps to, you know, to be some pretty manipulative, and then making sure their own children are protected. I just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge behavioral science behind it. I have buddies who came out of their PhD programs in behavioral science that were hired by these companies, and they were paid a lot of money to figure out human behavior and track it and understand it and then modify it. And it's just one, it's, my buddy showed me reams of data from the gaming company, and it's a big gaming company. And that's what he did for years. And, you know, his kids don't watch screens because he knows.
So can that functionality be used for good? I mean, couldn't we be like using
some
it
of those
in
Calm
different
apps,
ways?
I think are. Yeah, I think some of the stuff that he was talking about, great performance today. I really enjoyed watching, Jeremy. Thank you. But I think that's a piece of where it is can it, yes, it is being used with Calm type apps. But then the question that we have to ask ourselves is, can it be trusted? And, you know, where does that data go? And if you do start to be, you know, like, I'm very healthy as well. You guys know I do. Jan and I have push-up contests all the time. But it's one of those things where if I'm staying in shape and all of a sudden I fall off, and then my doctor notices, or that data goes someplace else, and or I get some kind of disease that I don't want people to know about, then I'm worried that I'm uninsurable and that it's going to get out into the market. And, you know, those things scare, I think, everybody.
Well, I think you just brought up a really interesting point, right? Which is, something happens in your life that you are able to rectify, let's just say, or maybe it's just something as natural and inevitable that you cross a threshold from what's considered to be normal to overweight, or overweight to obese, and suddenly you see your premiums hike, and you're like, what the hell? You know, like, I was able to, you know, I just took a month off and went on safari and, you know, ate red meat all the time. So that was the part of the ethical aspect, I think, that, you know, Jeremiah was asking, which is, how much would you pay for the data? How much would you pay for people not to get the data? I just also wanted to share two thoughts. One is, I'm sure you guys know this. I almost put this quote in for you today, Jeremiah, but it was Nick Bilton had a conversation with Steve Jobs after the launch of the first iPad in 2014. And he asked Steve how his kids like the new device. Jobs replied, "They haven't used it. We limit how much technology our kids use at home." And then the other thing is, you know, I remember seeing my kids on, in particular, Snapchat with streaks. And I've never seen,
really? Wow.
And I've never seen, you know, anything as absolute, you know, oxygen invading as these dumb streaks, where they would just go in and send just, you know, like, it served no purpose. And it infuriated me at the time, just thinking, like, because it was preventing them from being present with themselves, with me, with each. I
have a question about that for Jeremiah and all of us, and that is that my experience with having the streak and then having the streak taken away was a positive experience, because it alerted me to other streaks in my life. So the fact that Sam Harris had the consciousness to do that was great for me, as it turns out, you know, as opposed to him never having a streak at all. And my question is, if companies have all this information on us, Jeremiah, can we turn that around and have information on the companies, so that, for example, I would be more persuaded to go with Sam Harris, just as an example, over other calming apps, because I know something about him and his consciousness, Do you know what I mean?
I
Like,
do.
can I know who the companies are based on the information that's out there about them coming to me?
Right. That comes back to the core business model of each company. Like, we know Facebook's business model is designed to be blinking at us and grab our attention, versus Apple's business model. It's a premium hardware product which you pay for up front. There's less concern about privacy of your data being exploited because you've already paid so much money for $1,200 phone. So that's like the first thing. But that's a privileged market to have all these Apple devices, right? So this is actually an issue with society, because there's this digital divide. Those that don't have access to those devices, they're going to use the free apps or the free social networks, which will collect their data and monetize it in another way, versus the wealthier people will not. So we do need to think about the levels here in society, and that's a very challenging topic. I don't have
I would
any
offer up
solutions.
that one of the big scary things
that was
AI
the natural silence, which we're clearly still working on. It was a big theme, from these interviews, Jeremiah, which is sometimes to like respect the pause and not feel obliged to jump in, which clearly I'm still not doing, but whatever, carry on.
Thank Jeremiah. The thing, I have two little boys. They're 9 and 7.
They're very cute. I saw one of them in a second.
Thank you. And they're very active in sports. And so I have, and I coach a lot of their teams, but what I do hear from the soccer, baseball, and basketball.
Whoa.
That's all?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a stay-at-home dad, so I can do that kind of stuff. But what we did notice with all of the parents, we talked about these screens, we talked about apps, we talked about games. And a lot of my kids go to a Mandarin immersion school. So we are in the privileged side of things. Most of the parents are two parents, very doting, very active, very involved. And that's the one thing you see. And then on the other side of the coin is the GE side of the school, which is the general education. And it's usually, most of those are Hispanic and African-American. And when I coach those kids, and you see the amount of screen time that they have, or the amount that they don't have the same inputs because of their parents. And we know that the science is remapping their brain. So the neuroplasticity of a little kid who sits in front of a computer screen and plays a video game because their parents are exhausted, or working 2 jobs, or whatever the actual issues may be, those little kids are at a distinct disadvantage. And that's not just in the screen time, it's the fact that they're not absorbing words. And there was studies based on this, that a 5-year-old who grows up like my little boys absorbs 5 million more words by the time they're 5 than a child who is not educated with 2 parents. And that is not capable of overcome. You can't overcome that, period. So it doesn't matter how much they grow afterwards. It's that exponential growth of their brain from the formative years of 0 to 5. And then coupled with that, we know as a society that video games are toxic to the human brain, and we don't do anything about it at all. I mean, we just don't. We actually encourage it. So it's just mind-blowing to me that we're still having these discussions, and we're going to have a whole generation of kids that their brains have been remapped by technology. It's
frightening to me, because like my kid literally right now is on Zoom with her teacher, and all morning she's on, screens. But I don't have a choice. This is like.
Well, and there's a difference. You talked about the fact that there's release of dopamine and part of the Zoom issues. What we've talked about, this group specifically, is that I log on to this, not just because I love Joseph, but I need this. I need to be with my friends. And I've become friends with these people over the last 6 months. And so I'm using technology in a good way, I think. I don't think Zoom is necessarily as nefarious as what I'm talking about. I think obviously screen time is like anything else. If it's playing video games and releasing endorphins and constantly, versus being on screens with even my little boys with their fellow soccer team, that we have them get on it once a week before practice, which is virtual now. And they talk for a half hour, because you can just watch their little voices and I miss you, and hey Jax, look at this, and I drew this, and I play guitar, and so it's actually really cute. I think Zoom can be
it can be
more of a benefit. Yeah, and I'm sure there's deleterious effects of Zoom too.
It's probably extremes on both sides of that. With that said, I do need to go in a minute to manage the family and take another call for business.
No, I'm just making sure that I'm not on mute. This was great, and I hope that I lived up to the billing of not annoying you by just discussing your burpees.
You did great, thank you.
But I think it's going to be very, very I think interesting to see. And I loved how this conversation was contextualized with respect to now more than ever with respect to COVID. Bringing it back to the idea of it being Suicide Prevention Week, and recognizing and also just how you've evolved the thinking. Because I remember going to TechCrunch Disrupt and and Calacanis's, I think, launch, and seeing what was it, Ohm Dynamics, these wearable, like it was all wearables then. Even the what was it, the one that helped you with your posture. But I feel like this is a lot more helpful and profound and valuable now, and it probably is best described by this idea of what would happen if we used our powers, our technology, for good versus evil. And I mean, for me, still, and also, I think coming to terms with, as I said in my soliloquy, Jeremiah, healthy body, healthy mind, healthy body, how they're all interconnected. But it's not just how. It's almost selfish to think about my body and my mind. It's how does that affect, influence, interact with Jan's, Joey's, Bob's, Tom's, yours, Leslie, so on and so forth.
Thank you all for your time. Joseph, thank you for giving me a platform and space, and all the insightful comments from everybody here and in the prior chat room. Thank you all.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah,
Jeremiah,
I will email you a few little follow-ups. And what I always say to my guests is, this community is a family. Come back anytime, as often as you want.
Thank you for letting me see the tribe and be part of it. Take care, everybody.
That's cool. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
I got to jump off in about 2 minutes as well for another Zoom, but I just wanted to say there's almost infinitely many ethical questions that were raised by what we talked about today. I mean, for example, Jan started off by saying, isn't the logical end of calm tech no tech at all? And I've been rereading Thoreau. I'm reading Walden this week, and I recommend it to everybody. The ultimate simplify your life philosophy, the ultimate you and nature philosophy, the ultimate away from any tech that you don't absolutely need philosophy. It's so interesting. And my first mental response to Jan was, well, maybe it doesn't imply no tech, it does imply unobtrusive tech. And as soon as my brain heard the phrase unobtrusive tech, it said, then how to guard against stealth tech. And there are all these questions that, believe it or not, my son asked me to do a book with him years ago, and we did the book Superheroes in Philosophy. And one of the points my son brought up to me is that comic book authors since the 1930s have been thinking about technology and its impact in our lives. Whether technology helps us, whether it enhances us in positive ways, or it begins to transform us in ways that might not be positive. And his claim was that the comic book guys have given us an opportunity we've never taken advantage of. That is to say, go back to the Greek perspective that hardly anything is intrinsically good or intrinsically bad. It's all a matter of how we use it. And so my son said they've been warning us about technological enhancement of human beings, technological transformation of human life. They've been warning us about this for decades to try to get us to think through the implications so that we don't run aground of the law of unintended consequences in massive ways that we didn't see coming. And so even though I got to jump off in like 1 minute, I wanted to raise all that stuff just to plant it in your brains for
hold on.
reflection.
Hold on, before you go, I was actually reading the other day in Plato's Lemonade Stand, but
let's tell me what page, and I'll.
I'm kind of hoping
the author.
I'm kind of hoping he'd hold up one of my books, but then I realized I haven't sent it to him yet. But
if I write a book, can we all hold up our books?
Of course, absolutely.
Tom, I'm just going to leave you with
Here's
this
my
thought.
checkbook. Does that
hang
count?
on? No. Yes. If you're paying
Yes,
me,
it
then it does. But Tom, before I lose you, actually, and I'll just plant the seed for now.
Yeah.
Remember, Jeremiah said to me, "How much would you?" He said, "Would you pay for it?" And I said, "I'd pay to extend my life."
Yeah.
Well, what happens when one of these tech companies says, "We can add 6 months to your life or 3 because we anticipate this disease or this." Or we have a product that, or an artificial this, or a 3D printed that, and proactively they now have the ability, and all you need right now is 1 part Apple Watch, 1 part 23andMe. Do you really need anything else?
I know.
And boom, now suddenly, when it's not just a marketing promise, we can add quality to your life. We can add quantity to your life too.
And I was privy to, I talked to all the chief technology officers and chief information officers from the Fortune 50 companies that Hewlett Packard deals with. And I was in a session, a confidential session, where they briefed us on 3D printing and how it's already being used to create body parts and body organs, how we're not really far at all from that being a possible way to save anybody who can afford it from any medical problem they don't want to have.
But that goes to Leslie's point about the inequality.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Very important stuff. I'm supposed to host this session, guys. God bless. I loved it. You guys keep thinking in my absence. I know you will.
I will. It's a good opportunity to close us down almost exactly at 3:30, which is what we should be doing.
That's true.
But I will tomorrow. Is tomorrow Friday? Tomorrow is Murray Nossoe. Talk about a calming South African, storyteller. I'm just learning a little bit about him, but it should be. I think in particular, Jan is going to enjoy it. That's just my way of randomly ensuring that he tears himself away from his family reunion. But I think you will enjoy it.
Thank you.
See you, boys. Now, great show, Joey.
Yep,
see you guys tomorrow.